The summer of 1876 was a scorcher, the kind that made the pine needles brittle and the river run slow. Up in the dense folds of the Dakota Territory woods, a quiet reigned that weren't natural, not for that time of year anyhow. Birds kept to hushed tones, and even the wind seemed wary, like it knew something was watching. Deep in those woods, beneath a thicket of fern and old cedar, lay a girl no older than 17. Her name was Wiyaka Ska, White Feather. Her mother used to call her, on account of the snow-colored feather she wore braided into her long dark hair. She was Sioux, daughter of a medicine man, though she hadn't seen her father in moons. 3 nights prior, soldiers come through her village, while the men were out hunting. Said they were looking for horse thieves, but truth was, they came spoiling for blood. They found it, too. Wiyaka had only escaped by running, till her legs gave out, then crawling into the thick woods like a wounded fox. Her moccasins were torn, dress snagged in 6 places, and her belly had known only wild berries since the 3rd morning. She hadn't seen another soul since, just trees, sky, and the occasional flash of a deer tail in the underbrush. Each night, she made herself a hollow under the low-hanging limbs of a spruce, and each morning she woke starving, shaken, and fighting not to give up. But one thing kept her breathing. A song, soft as wind through a pine bough. Her mother's lullaby never left her thoughts. Wiyaka would hum it, low and slow, when fear curled around her throat like a snake. The song reminded her of firelight, of buffalo hides, of a time before the world turned cruel. Now, on the 4th morning, she lay tucked under a rotted log, lips cracked and throat raw. A blue jay's call startled her awake, and for a heartbeat, she didn't remember who she was. Just another piece of the forest, with skin and bones and hurt. That's when she heard it. Not the cry of a bird or the crackle of a branch under paw, but steel, the ringing, echoing strike of metal on wood. An axe, regular, rhythmic, a man working, and close. She didn't move right away. Could have been a trap, but the sound was steady, and there was something in it, honest labor, not violence. Still, she crept quiet as dusk, following the noise until the trees thinned and the sun spilled onto a patch of land cleared by human hands. There he stood, a tall man, shirt off in the heat, brown with sawdust and sun, hair down to his collar, and a beard that hadn't seen a razor in weeks. His hands were the size of ham hocks, gripping that axe like it was part of him. Every swing landed true. The tree shuddered under his blows, bark flying in all directions. Wiyaka crouched, watching. She was scared, sure, but more than that, she was curious. He didn't look like the soldiers. No uniform, no horse, no gun at his hip. Just a man. Alone. The tree finally gave way with a groan, crashing down with a mighty thud that sent a pair of sparrows scattering. The man leaned on his axe, wiping sweat from his brow with a bandana. That's when his eyes found her. She froze. Not breathing. Not moving. But he didn't shout. Didn't raise a weapon. He said one word. Howdy. Wiyaka didn't move, not right away. She weren't used to being seen, without fear following, close behind. But this man, he just stood there, leaning on his axe, eyes steady but not sharp, like he'd spent enough time staring down trees. He didn't feel the need to stare down people. Name's Eli, he said, slow and soft. Eli Mercer. You hungry? Her stomach answered for her, growling loud enough to make a squirrel scurry off. Eli smiled faint-like and nodded toward a small cabin just beyond the tree-line. It weren't much, just a single-room shack with a tin roof and a chimney leaning, like it had had a few too many. But it stood straight and proud, much like Eli himself. Wiyaka didn't speak. Not 'cause she didn't want to, but 'cause she didn't know how he'd take her voice. Her people's tongue wasn't welcome in most white men's ears. But she stepped forward, cautious, keeping to the edges of the clearing like a deer sniffing for traps. Eli walked ahead, leaving the axe stuck deep in the tree stump. He opened the cabin door and stepped aside like he was inviting royalty. Ain't much, he said, but it's dry and there's coffee on the stove. Inside was clean, simpler than a prayer, but warm. A wood-burning stove crackled in one corner. A table with 2 stools sat under the window, and a bed was tucked up against the back wall, blankets folded tight. A small pot of beans simmered on the stove, and beside it, half a loaf of cornbread rested on a tin plate. Eli didn't crowd her, just pointed to the plate and said, "Go on now." She took a seat, slow, eyes never leaving him. Her hands trembled as she lifted the cornbread, breaking it into small bites. He poured a tin cup of coffee and set it in front of her, then took his own seat across the table. "Been working these woods near 5 years," he said after a spell. "Ain't seen a soul for the past 2. Just trees and wind and the occasional fox." She ate slow, her eyes lifting now and again. He was watching the fire, not her. "Name's Wiyaka Ska," she finally said, voice rasped from disuse. "White feather." He nodded like that name had weight, and he intended to carry it with care. "You running from someone?" She looked down at her plate. The cabin filled with the sound of crackling logs and summer cicadas humming outside the window. Eli didn't press. "Well," he said, "I reckon whoever you're running from ain't got the sand to come find you out here. And if they do, they'll have to deal with my axe before they get to you." The words were plain. No flourish. Just the kind of truth a man forges in solitude. Wiyaka finished her food, wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, and let her shoulders drop for the first time in days. Later, as dusk bled across the sky in ribbons of orange and gold, Eli lit a lantern and handed her a blanket. "You take the bed," he said. "I'll take the floor. Ain't proper any other way." She watched him curl up by the hearth, one arm behind his head, the other resting on his chest. The firelight danced across his face, softening the lines of a life hard-earned. Wiyaka lay down, and for the first time since the massacre, she let sleep take her without fear. In the woods outside, the wind shifted. The world, it seemed, had taken a breath. Morning came slow in the forest, with golden fingers of sunlight poking through the gaps in the roof, like they was searching for something lost. Wiyaka woke first, though it was hard to tell if she truly slept or just drifted in and out of dreams too heavy to carry. Eli was still asleep on the floor, one hand tucked under his head, the other resting easy near the hat he'd dropped beside him. He didn't snore, just breathed deep like a man who'd wrestled ghosts in the night and made peace with them. She sat quiet, listening. The forest was alive again, birds chirping, leaves rustling. The world didn't feel so heavy. By the time Eli stirred and rubbed the sleep from his eyes, she was standing by the stove, poking at the embers like she'd done it 100 times before. "Morning," he said, voice rough from sleep. She nodded, then hesitated. "Thank you," she said in English. "Careful like." He just smiled. "Wasn't no trouble. I'm glad you stayed." They spent that day side by side. Eli chopped logs while Wiyaka gathered kindling and berries from the edge of the clearing. Neither talked much, but it weren't silence, just the kind of quiet shared by folks who understood that words ain't always necessary. By late afternoon, they sat under the porch overhang, watching the sky shift from blue to amber. "You from a tribe nearby?" Eli asked, breaking the still. She nodded slow. "Lakota. My father was a healer. My mother a weaver. Our village was, it ain't there no more." He didn't ask how or why, just looked off toward the treetops. "I lost my folks to fever in '69. Left me with nothing but an axe and an appetite." She steadied his hands. "Big, strong, but not cruel. Calloused, yes, but not from harm, only hard work. That night, she taught him a song, one her mother used to sing while hanging herbs to dry in the summer sun." Wiyaka's voice was soft, barely louder than the crackle of the fire. Eli didn't understand the words, but he sat still, eyes half closed, like the melody was cleaning his soul. Then, just as the fire began to dim, something snapped in the woods. Eli stood instantly, eyes narrow. He reached for his axe, not his rifle, mind, but the close-hand tool of a man who ain't afraid of fighting face to face. Wiyaka was already crouched low, her hand on the floor, feeling the tremble of the ground. Her eyes locked on his. "Too heavy for deer," she whispered. They waited, breath held, eyes pinned to the dark beyond the tree line. Another snap, closer this time, then a silhouette, tall and thin, moving just beyond the reach of the firelight. Eli's voice was low and steady. "Stay inside." But she didn't. Wiyaka rose, slow and sure, and stepped to the door beside him. The figure stepped into the light. It was a man, dirty, beard matted, eyes sunken like a wolf on its last legs. He had a rifle slung across his back and a knife on his hip. He looked from Eli to Wiyaka, and his mouth curled into a smile that ain't never meant nothing good. "Well now," he said, voice like gravel, "ain't this a picture?" Eli stepped forward, just enough to block the door. "Keep walking," he said. But the stranger didn't. Not yet. The stranger's name was Cade. Least that's what he said when Eli asked him straight. "I don't mean harm," Cade said, lifting his hands palm out like a man might do to a skittish horse. "Just been following the river. Ran out of beans 2 days back." But Eli didn't budge from the porch. That axe of his rested easy in one hand, like it was part of him. Wiyaka stood just inside the door, eyes sharp as flint. "You lost?" Eli asked. Cade chuckled, but there weren't no humor in it. Ain't no such thing as lost when you got nowhere to go. He was lean, hungry looking, but there was something else in his eyes, like he'd been waiting for trouble to show up, and now that it had, he was eager to dance with it. Eli finally nodded once. "You can rest here. One night. You eat, you sleep, you leave at sunup." Cade looked past him toward Wiyaka, and something in his gaze made her spine bristle. But she said nothing, just stepped back as Eli motioned him inside. Supper was quiet. Eli fixed up a mess of beans and cornmeal, passing plates without ceremony. Cade ate like a man who'd forgotten what warm food felt like in his belly. But Wiyaka never let her eyes stray from him. "You got family out there?" Cade asked, mouth half full, motioning toward her. She didn't answer. "She's under my roof," Eli said low. "That's all you need to know." Cade nodded, grin flickering. "Fair enough." When night came, they laid out bedrolls on opposite sides of the cabin. Wiyaka took Eli's cot, he insisted, and Cade curled up by the stove like a tired dog. Eli sat with his back against the door, axe beside him, eyes never closing for long. But sometime near midnight, Wiyaka stirred from sleep. Something felt wrong. Not loud, just off, like the forest itself had quit breathing. She turned her head slow and caught the glint of metal. Cade was crouched near Eli, hand hovering over the axe. Before she could cry out, Eli's hand shot up, catching Cade by the wrist. "Should have walked on," Eli said, voice like thunder. Cade snarled and lunged, the knife in his other hand coming fast, but Eli twisted, slamming him against the table. The whole room jolted with the crash. Wiyaka was up, grabbing a fire poker without thinking. As Cade scrambled to his feet, she swung, caught him across the jaw. He hit the wall, dazed. Eli followed with a fist like a freight wagon. Cade went down hard, teeth clacking against wood. They tied him up with a length of old rope and dragged him out into the night, leaving him under the cedar tree. "You kill him?" Wiyaka asked, breathless. Eli shook his head. "Not unless he makes me." They sat by the fire the rest of the night, eyes half on the window, half on the door. By dawn, Cade was gone. Rope cut. No sign of him, just footprints heading east. "Think he'll come back?" she asked. Eli looked to the trees, then to her. "Only if he forgets what I'm capable of." Wiyaka stepped to the porch, breathing deep. "Then we better be ready." After Cade vanished into the timber, the air around Eli's cabin grew heavier, like the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Wiyaka spent her days helping more, splitting kindling, patching leaks in the roof, even mending the old wool blanket that had seen better decades. Eli didn't say much about the fight, nor about Cade, but every evening, when the sun dipped behind the ridge, he checked his trap slower, watched the tree line longer, and always kept his axe close. One afternoon, Wiyaka wandered down to the stream that curled lazy through the rocks like a silver snake. The heat had settled over the land like a wet quilt, and the water was the only cool thing around. She rolled up her buckskin leggings, wading into the shallows, watching minnows dart between her toes. Eli found her there not long after, carrying 2 tin cups and a jug of something strong-smelling. He set them on a flat rock and grinned shy-like. "Figure a day like this calls for something cold." They sat side by side, cups filled with creek water, and a splash of molasses spirits Eli had brewed from old corn mash. It burned going down, but the laugh that followed warmed better than the sun. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Wiyaka asked after a spell. Eli leaned back, staring up through the pine boughs. "Used to. Thought I might chase gold, maybe get a plot of land in Montana. But the deeper I got into these woods, the less I wanted to chase anything." She nodded. "I used to dream about the great river," she said. "Thought maybe I'd paddle down it, find the ocean someday." He looked at her then, eyes soft. "You still could." She shook her head slow. "Not now. Not yet." The wind picked up just enough to rustle the leaves above, and for a moment, the woods felt gentle again, like they were willing to forgive a soul or two. But come nightfall, that peace shattered. Eli had just stepped outside to fetch the washbin when the first arrow thunked into the doorframe, buried to the fletching, quivering like a finger accusing. "Down!" he yelled, slamming the door behind him. Wiyaka duffed to the floor, heart hammering. Another arrow shattered the lantern on the porch. Then a voice, low, oily, carried in through the trees. "Come on out, woodsman. We just want the girl." Eli's face turned to stone. "Kate," he muttered. "Brought friends." Wiyaka's hands curled into fists. "They know who I am." "Don't matter," Eli said, standing tall. "They'll have to come through me." The cabin was old, but solid. He bolted the door, shoved the table against the windows, and handed Wiyaka the axe while he loaded his rifle. "Firelight's out," he said. "We got one chance. If they rush, don't wait. Swing hard." Outside, Cade's voice taunted again. "Don't make this harder, Eli. I got 3 men with me. You ain't got but one shot." Eli chambered a round slow. "Then I best make it count." The woods went still. Then all hell broke loose. The first blow came hard, boot to the cabin door, splinters flying like wasps. Eli braced it with his shoulder, grit in his teeth as would crack beneath the strain. "Hold tight," he barked. "Don't move till I say." Outside, the firelight flickered as Cade and his men lit torches, throwing them against the cabin walls. Dry pine caught fast. Flames licked up the sides like red serpents hungry for breath. Eli spun toward the stove, grabbed a bucket of creek water, and doused the wall. Smoke filled the room, thick and choking. "Back door," he shouted. Now, Wiyaka yanked the latch on the back hatch, but Cade had planned for that. One of his men waited there, blade glinting. Without thinking, she swung Eli's axe wide and fast, catching the man across the shoulder. He yelped, staggered, and Eli's rifle roared, ending the fight before it truly started. They bolted through the smoke. Trees loomed like giants, moonlight barely piercing the thick canopy. Wiyaka led, barefoot, silent, moving like wind through tall grass. Eli followed, rifle in hand, the flames of his cabin glimmering through the trunks behind him. "They'll track us," he panted. "We got till dawn, maybe less." Wiyaka nodded. "I know a place," she said. "Old hunting path, hidden by stone and stream. My father showed it to me when I was small." They ran, up over mossy ridges, down past tangled roots. Behind them, voices shouted. Cade's voice rose above the rest, cold and clear. "You're just prolonging it, woodsman. Ain't no use running." But Eli didn't answer. His lungs burned, legs heavy with effort, but he stayed close to Wiyaka's heels. She was swift, sure-footed, the forest folding around her like it remembered her blood. Finally, they reached a hollow beneath a rock ledge, half hidden by fern and briar. The stream babbled nearby, covering their scent and their noise. They dropped down, breathing heavy, side by side in the dirt and leaf litter. Eli looked at her, sweat mixed in, with soot on his brow. "You all right?" Wiyaka wiped her hands on her dress, nodding. For now, the night deepened. Crickets sang, frogs echoed through the gully, and above it all, faint and distant, came the crackle of fire devouring the only home Eli had left. He didn't speak of it, just reached out and took her hand. Dawn came slow, its golden fingers stretching across the pines like it didn't want to wake the world too sudden. Wiyaka and Eli emerged from the hollow quiet, moving careful. The fire was behind him now, ashes in the breeze. But the danger? That still walked the woods. Eli bent low near a patch of damp moss, eyes narrow. 3 sets of tracks, he muttered. Cade's still out there, hunting us. Wiyaka crouched beside him. We can't keep running. Sooner or later, he'll find us. Eli nodded. Then we stop running. We make a stand. They followed the stream deeper into the valley, where the land dipped low, and the trees grew older than any memory. There, Wiyaka found what she'd been searching for, an old stone ridge with a cave just big enough to hide in, half covered in ivy. My father called this place the Fox's Den, she whispered. Said no man ever found it unless they were meant to. Eli ran a hand along the stone, nodding slow. Then we make it mean something. They set to work fast. Eli dug a shallow pit at the mouth of the den, filling it with dry brush and kindling. Wiyaka sharpened sticks, made traps from snare wire he'd salvaged off his belt. They moved like one, minds in tune, no wasted words. By midday, the forest was silent again. Too silent. Eli loaded his rifle, 1 bullet left in the chamber. We get 1 clean shot, he said. Wiyaka looked to the trees, her heart steady. That's all we'll need. Then came the rustle. 3 shadows moved through the underbrush, 1 lean and limp-in Cade, 1 short and mean-eyed, the other broad like a bull. They stopped just yards from the ridge, squinting through the trees. Cade stepped forward, blade out, eyes glittering. You hid good, he called. But this ain't a big forest, and I ain't patient. Eli stood tall atop the ridge, rifle aimed down. This is your last warning, Cade. Turn around. Cade grinned. Nah, I came for the girl. But maybe I'll take your scalp too. The second man moved first, sneaking toward the side. But Wiyaka's snare caught him clean, hauling him off his feet with a snap. Eli fired. The bullet caught the third man in the chest, dropping him like a sack of flour. Then Cade charged. He was faster than he looked, knife glinting in the sunlight. Eli tossed aside his empty rifle and met him with bare hands, the two crashing into the dirt like a storm let loose. They rolled, fists flying, knees digging. Cade slashed, cut Eli's arm, but the woodsman caught his wrist, twisted, and slammed his fist into Cade's jaw with a crack. Wiyaka moved in, fire poker in hand, but Eli raised his voice. No, he grunted. He's mine. The fight raged on until Cade's blade slipped from his hand and Eli drove him to the ground, pinning him with a forearm across the throat. Cade coughed, eyes wide with fear. She's just a squaw, he hissed. Why risk your life for her? Eli's voice was low and steady. Because she ain't yours to take. Then he stood, letting Cade cough and crawl, broken and breathing hard. You leave this forest, Eli said, voice like thunder. And if I ever see you again, you'll wish you hadn't. Cade fled, limping into the trees. Wiyaka stepped beside Eli, eyes never leaving the tree-line. You let him live. Eli nodded, so he can remember what it means to be beaten by someone who ain't afraid. For a full day after Cade vanished into the woods, the forest held its silence, like a hymn too holy to speak. Eli and Wiyaka stayed near the fox's den, resting wounds and gathering what little strength was left in their bones. Eli's arm was wrapped in clean cloth. Wiyaka had made a salve from pine pitch and wild mint that took the burn out. He didn't complain, just winced now and then, mostly when she caught him staring. You all right? She asked finally, as they sat by the creek. He nodded slow. I reckon I've been worse. Wiyaka looked to the sky. You lost your home. He was quiet a moment, then said, Wasn't the walls that made it home. They spent the next morning gathering what they could. The cabin was gone, reduced to smoldering ash and charred beams. Eli sifted through the blackened rubble, salvaging nails, tools, a dented cookpot. She found his mother's Bible, edges singed, but the pages still legible. He took it with hands gentle as a prayer. They camped that night by the clearing, not to mourn, but to remember. My father used to say every fire is a teacher, Wiyaka said. Destroys, yes, but also clears space for new things to grow. Eli looked at her, brow furrowed. You think we can grow here? She reached out, brushed soot from his jaw. I think we already are. The next days passed with the rhythm of renewal. Eli felled fresh trees, not with anger, but with purpose. Wiyaka stripped bark, not to forget, but to honor. They worked side by side, building not just walls, but a life. No blueprint, no law, just trust. One afternoon, Wiyaka found a patch of wildflowers where the old hearth once stood. She knelt there, whispering to the wind in her native tongue, planted in a single stone carved with the mark of her people. "This land remembers," she told Eli, "even if no one else does." Eli nodded. "Then we'll give it something good to remember." By week's end, a new frame stood, rough-hewn logs notched tight, a roof of cedar that smelled sweet and strong. The fire burned again, this time from a new hearth, built by their hands, not haunted by the past. And one night, sitting under the stars, Eli turned to her, voice low. "You ever think about staying?" She looked long at him, at the scars, the smile, the strength. "I think," she said, "I already have." By the time the first rain fell in late August, the new cabin stood strong against the wind. It wasn't much by town standards, just one room, a sloped roof, and a chimney that puffed soft smoke into the sky. But it was built of honest labor and quiet hope. Wiyaka had carved a small pattern above the door, a feather inside a circle. "So the spirits know who lives here," she said with a smile. Eli had cleared a patch of land down near the creek. With her help, he dug rows, planted squash and corn, and even coaxed a few tomato seeds from a packet buried deep in his old rucksack. "You ever farmed before?" she asked, grinning as he wrestled with a hoe like it owed him money. "Only thing I ever grew was a beard," he muttered, swiping sweat from his brow. They laughed easy those days, the kind of laughter that only comes after fears had its fill and passed on. The forest, once a place of hiding, now welcomed them like kin. Deer passed without fear, and even the crows seemed to caw with less spite. Wiyaka began teaching Eli words in Dakota, soft syllables that rolled like river stones. He taught her how to whittle, how to shape a bough from ash wood, how to find the stars in a sky too wide to hold. One evening, as the sky turned pink and gold, Wiyaka brought him a bundle of herbs wrapped in cloth. "For strength," she said, "and for dreams." He looked at her long and careful. "I never dreamt of this," he said. "Not till now." She stepped close, touching his chest with her hand. "Then let's keep dreaming." That night, as the wind whispered through the pines, they sat by the fire, side by side. He told her about his father, how the man never spoke much but always showed up when it mattered. She told him about her mother's songs, and how she'd hum them to the wind to keep from feeling alone. Eli took her hand. "I reckon," he said slow, "that whatever comes next, I'd be mighty proud to meet it with you." Wiyaka didn't answer right away, just leaned her head against his shoulder and let the silence say what needed saying. Autumn touched the edges of summer like an old friend coming for one last visit. The air held a chill at night, and the trees whispered secrets in colors of gold and fire. Eli and Wiyaka worked side by side, stacking firewood, canning what little they grew, preparing not just for winter, but for life, a shared life, one not defined by what they'd lost, but what they'd chosen to build. On a late September morn, Eli rode into the nearest town, Little Rock Fork, needing nails, salt, and a proper skillet. He wore his cleanest shirt, which weren't saying much, and tried to ignore the stares. Folks knew him, the lumberjack hermit. But today he walked tall. At the general store, a man leaned off the porch rail and muttered just loud enough, "Here you're shacked up with one o' them wild girls." Eli paused, didn't raise his voice, didn't lift a fist. He just said, calm as a Sunday sermon, "She's got more courage than any man I've met, and I've fought bears, storms, and bandits." Then he paid for his things and rode out without looking back. Meanwhile, Wiyaka was home, watching the sky. She felt it, same way her father had once taught her to read the earth's breath. Trouble was near. Just before dusk, the rider came. Not Cade. No, he'd run off for good. But this man wore a uniform, a U.S. Marshal. He stopped at the edge of the clearing, hand raised in peace. "You White Feather?" he asked. She nodded. He dismounted slow, respectful. "I'm here on account of a report. Army scouts saw someone matching your description." I'm supposed to bring you in for questioning. Nothing more. Not a warrant. Not a bounty. But he hesitated. That's if you want to go. Wiyaka looked past him, into the trees where her mother once sang, where her people once danced, then back at the home she'd helped raise from ash. I have nothing to say to men who ask questions they don't want real answers to, she said. The marshal studied her, then nodded. Didn't think you would. He handed her a paper. But you best keep this. It's a pardon. Says you were never part of any crime, that the village Fallon was a mistake, a tragedy of circumstance. They call it. Wiyaka took the paper and folded it slow. Thank you, she said. He tipped his hat, turned, and rode off without a skin more. When Eli returned at twilight, he saw her sitting on the porch, the firelight in her eyes, the paper in her lap. He sat beside her. They come. She nodded. They left. He rested his arm around her shoulders. Good. That night, the stars came out early, and the wind whispered through the chimney like a lullaby. And come morning, the forest didn't hold its breath no more. It breathed with them. Two souls once lost, now home,